All right, let's talk about New Zealand, because New Zealand has gone absolutely crazy. Now, it's a beautiful place. The people are very great, but their government is growing increasingly fascist, draconian, and doing some things that need our attention here on Redacted.
Well, it's interesting, right? Because New Zealand has this international reputation of being popular. Because they were known as a COVID success story. They had draconian lockdowns. They had zero COVID for a long time. Their prime minister was always on camera. But there are things that are happening there that are very disenfranchising to everyday people that are worth talking about. For instance, farmers in New Zealand are continuing to protest crackdowns on their industry, much like the Dutch farmers. New Zealand has proposed strict measures on farmers in pursuit of their Zero Carbon Act 2030. Bjorn Lundberg and other climate researchers talk about how many of these countries just kind of picked a year out of their hat, and emissions it wasn't really based on science. They just said, let's lower carbon by this much by this year. And it became something nice to talk about on the campaign trail. But so why are they doing that? Why by this year? These proposals are meant to reduce methane by that time frame. Again, these are proposals, so they are still open for consultation, but that's why the protests are happening now during this consultation period, because farmers are letting it be known that these proposals will harm them. Listen.
The government wants to introduce an emissions tax that will, on its own numbers, rip 20% of sheep and beef sector's production and 6% of dairy sector's production. Look around you. Every fifth farmer you see here today will be gone by 2030.
Wow.
And the ones left will be under immense pressure and strain.
So I just want to, because maybe some of our viewers had a hard time hearing him. 1 out of every 5 farms will be gone.
Yes.
Gone.
And the who is left is under immense strain, which makes it kind of comical, because the government is saying, under this new regulation, there would be tax on farmers based on their estimated methane and nitrous oxide gas generated by their livestock herds, starting in 2025. So really soon here, right? So you're going to have to look left and look right and decide which cow do you keep. Payments would come due every 1 to 3 years, and every farmer who reached a certain threshold for herd size and fertilizer use would be affected. And the government is saying that farmers will recoup this money by charging more for environmentally friendly products, which is comical.
Come on, really?
You're not. In this economy, no.
So
absolutely not.
I'm going to buy what, a grain or a grass-fed sheep milk soap bar? And that's going to lower
you're a chicken farmer and you decide to make organic chicken pillows because you have to breed, you have to think of a new business in order to do this, with the feathers.
Oh, okay.
I meant, I don't know. I'm bullshitting.
Maybe you're onto something there. Maybe you're onto something.
Right. I know nothing, Jon Snow.
Sheep pillows.
But the government says that this will help farmers recycle revenue back into their sector in order to invest in new technology, research, and initiatives to farm in a new way. And the farmers are saying, no, that's not how this is going to work. They say this is an effort by the government to brag internationally about what they can do and not actually help the environment. Listen.
Why are they doing this? Well, really it seems to have been done so the Prime Minister and the Climate Change Minister can go and attend Me Too meetings around the world and stand on the podium and effectively say, mine's bigger than yours. And it doesn't matter if the government process or the WEF partnership model was there. Putting millions into a fund for research sounds really good, but it's going to attract salaries. And the bit that comes out the bottom will probably be spent on research. We've already spent $200 billion so far on research and came up with virtually nothing, except the fact that we might be able to breed animals that are more efficient.
So kind of hard to hear because of the background noise. Can you sum up what he's saying there?
So he's saying basically these goals are arbitrary, which is true. And they're doing this so that they can go around to Me Too meetings and say, mine's bigger than yours. Like my cuts my emissions targets. And basically they're saying that this will save all kinds of money and we'll put it into research. And he says, we've been spending money on research and all we've found is that maybe we can breed more efficient animals. I'm not exactly sure what that means, if that means biolab type meat or something like that. But he's like, we're not getting there. And they make the point that why target us for emissions? There are so many other industries you can target. Why start with us? And in fact, he's right. So when he talks about New Zealand's history of investing in clean energy, let's just look back at the next decade. Now, this comes again from Bjorn Lundberg's great book, False Alarm. And he talks about the fact that New Zealand was actually the first country in the world to promise to go carbon neutral, and also the first country to have spectacularly failed, and the first to promise for a second time to try to achieve the same thing. So we're living it. The first time didn't go so well. We're in the second time. So he mentions in 2007, Prime Minister Helen Clark declared that she wanted to be carbon neutral by 2020. We've been there. It's come and gone. New Zealand not only failed to achieve the vision, but also failed to reduce any emissions. The latest 2019 official statistics show that the country's total emission will be higher in 2020 than they were when Ms. Clark's ambition was declared. And New Zealand is on track to be a whopping 123% off the Prime Minister's vision. Yet in 2018, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern re-upped the pledge, promising to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, and was able to pass legislation for exactly that goal in 2019. And did it help? And will it help? Like, if that were actually achieved, what would that do for the rest of us, for the planet, for New Zealand? Well, he plays that out. He says, if we assume that New Zealand will actually deliver on its net zero promise in 2050 and stick to it throughout the rest of the century, the total amount of greenhouse gas reduction will, according to the standard estimate from the UN's climate panel, deliver a temperature reduction in the year 2100 of 0.004 degrees Fahrenheit. Given the expected temperature increase by around 2100, this means that New Zealand going net zero by 2050 will postpone the warming we expected to see on January 1st, 2100 by about 3 weeks. So that's nice. Hurt those farmers for that extra 3 weeks.
So crush the farmers, run those people out of business. I mean, this is all part of the takeover, right? This is all part of the Davos plan, the World Economic Forum plan to consolidate power, take over people's farms, run these people out of business, get them away from processing meat, get them onto these plant-based garbage, products, and control everyone. And of course, New Zealand was a test bed for this. I mean, New Zealand and Australia. A lot of people, similarities here, but we see a lot of Australian viewers too. And there's a lot of similarities, of course. But these two were like Petri dish test beds for COVID lockdowns and government control. And
yes, we're going to talk about that in a second, actually, because the question remains, why do this? Is it just to continue disenfranchising people and taking away what they have? Well, it does sure seem like it. The two gentlemen we just played you, they come from a group called Groundswell New Zealand, and they claim that the government is actually using climate change to take farmers' land. Here's a letter that one farmer received in July telling them that the state is going to take their land because it has use case interest for them, basically. They're going to, pay them what they think is commensurate. And they say that 1,500 such landowners have received letters like this. Now, you may be wondering, why haven't you heard about this? Especially because, like I said, New Zealand is popular. It got a lot of press during the pandemic because Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern was considered a pandemic hero by the mainstream media for pandemic lockdowns and travel bans.
Oh, CNN loved her, and people referenced her all the time. There was a lot of commentary about what she
what happens when you take it seriously, when you put vaccine mandates in place, when you lock down borders. They had anyway, well, maybe because she's also so strict on information is another reason that you haven't heard about this.
I was wondering.
When addressing the United Nations recently, she said that online speech is a weapon and should be regulated like a weapon by all politicians. Listen.
After all, the face of war has changed, and with that, the weapons used. The tools used to challenge the statehood of others are hidden and more complex. Traditional combat, espionage, and the threat of nuclear weapons are now accompanied by cyber attacks, prolific disinformation, and manipulation of whole communities and societies. Now, as leaders, we have never treated the weapons of old in the same way as those that have emerged. And that's understandable. After all, a bullet takes a life. A bomb takes out a whole village. A lie online or from a podium does not. But what if that lie, told repeatedly and across many platforms, prompts, inspires, or motivates others to take up arms, to threaten the security of others, to turn a blind eye to atrocities, or worse, to become complicit in them? What then? This is no longer a hypothetical. The weapons of war have changed. They are upon us and require the same level of action and activity that we put into the weapons of old.
Weapons. And then right after that speech, I just learned she went and had a wine and cheese hour with Justin Trudeau.
Oh, okay. Too popular if you're talking about Western media. I see your comments in the chat. When I said that she was popular, the chat kind of freaked out. I know that that is not universally felt, but if you were reading New York Times, if you were watching the Western media, if you were watching mainstream media, you would think that they were popular.
No,
because
what
they
you said,
are, what I mean is pandemic stars in the way that, I don't know, Andrew Cuomo, right, was a pandemic star.
Well, you don't need to qualify. What you were saying is that the Western media tried to play her up as some big hero.
Yes, that's
right.
What I mean.
Like, put her on the cover of Time magazine. See what she did in New Zealand.
Absolutely, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
So what is she saying here? Does any of this scare you? Because it scares me. She's saying words are more dangerous than weapons, and her words. So, like, what are those words?
Right. So her words are fine, apparently.
Yeah.
Unless I'm missing something, Philip and David, you guys can. I mean, her words are fine, but your words repeated enough times could be the equivalent of a nuclear bomb.
I mean, her words locked down children and elderly people, and people did die from lockdowns too.
Right.
So how come her words shouldn't be challenged? Those are kind of like nukes. For some people, they were.
Absolutely, they were.
So punishable, and then punishable by what? Because in New Zealand, illegal possession of a firearm is punishable by jail time. So are we going to start punishing commensurately for words the government doesn't like? You see where I'm extrapolating here? You don't have to play this out too far to get to a very dangerous place.
Right.
And we don't even know the extent of the damage her words have done just yet, because that's all still coming to fruition.
Yes,
we're learning things every day.
Right, absolutely.
Well, I'm just curious too, because New Zealand has become now the popular place for billionaires to go and build their end of days bunkers. You know, Peter Thiel is building a bunker there. Other billionaires are building bunkers in New Zealand on the hillside overlooking Queenstown and other places there. And so it seems like, of course, there's a reason they are, right? It's to keep the riffraff away. It's to have compliant people nearby, people who, won't uprise, won't cause problems, are going to be under this sort of draconian laws by this government. So you'll have a fully compliant sort of sheep population to make sure that these billionaires are fine.
Do we know where hobbits fall on all this? Has anybody polled them?
No, you can go to Hobbiton. When I went to New Zealand, I wanted to go to Hobbiton, and they're very compliant, the hobbits.
Yes, right.
I was wondering, were they?
That's the whole thing.
They're agreeable.
They're very compliant. They are agreeable, and they're adorable. But these words, like the idea that we can't, and who is going to tell us what speech is allowed? I mean, you're seeing a theme here, right? But these government entities, these governments that are...
Well, we can get a clue based on what social media allows us to say,
right,
given that it's, the blind leading the blind with social media and the government.
Well, we've heard from so many New Zealand viewers who've said, thank you for your show. We can't get any of this type of news here in New Zealand. And the same as Australia. I just saw a message from an Australian viewer that said, wow, this is the first time learning about this. But then again, I live in Australia and I'm not allowed to find this stuff out. Like we're censored.
We're not either, though. We're
true.
not allowed to find it in the U.S. either, except for shows like this. Like you
Right.
can't. You're not going to find this on mainstream media, so it's the same thing for us.
Yeah.
True. Yeah.
Another thing worth noting in that speech that gave me pause. My daughter was homesick today, and I was listening to this on headphones while I was sitting next to her, and I was like, "No, girl, no." After I heard that, my daughter's like, "What are you watching?" This is what I was watching.
And that's why on pandemic preparedness, we support efforts to develop a new global health legal instrument, strengthened international health regulations, and a strong and empowered World Health Organization.
Nope. No, I don't like any of those words.
So we need to make the World Health
Global legal mandates.
Yeah, this is what we've been talking about here on the show, guys. This is all part of this new world order, this unipolar world order. And when you hear that, when Vladimir Putin gets up and says, no, the only way forward is a multipolar order, sovereign states that care for their own people, right? Regardless of what you think about Putin, like that pisses them off, because this idea of a unipolar world government health organization that's going to supersede governments to tell them to lock down, to put their digital currency in the hands of this world. That's exactly what they want, guys. The World Health Organization wants to be able to have total control, and the United States went along with it. Canada went along with it. New Zealand's going along with it. Thank God Brazil and Africa, an African nation, stood up and said, no.
Well, Brazil under President Bolsonaro.
Yes.
We'll see what happens now under new Brazilian leadership.
True, yeah. But but you're watching it. So you want to know how this stuff unfolds? It's out there in the open. You can read the documents. You can listen to the Prime Minister of New Zealand. You can listen to the Prime Minister of Canada. You can listen to the President of the United States, all saying the same thing. Mm-hmm. It's happening. Like, it's not a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
It's right in front of our freaking faces. It's happening.
So
that was my question all along. I was like, how in the world is all of this happening globally? Like, it was like the narrative that came out of the U.S. was just accepted, and no questions were asked about anything. It's just like, nope, we're doing it. Boom, boom, boom. They all fell in line. And like, we're still fighting to get data of exactly what has happened. But it's like, I just was so confused. Like, how did that happen?
Yeah. And because of these meetings, right? When they get together, and they're not even secret, it's on their agenda. Here are the meetings. Here's in our documents what we're going to talk about and what our goals are for the Great Reset Plan and the World Health Organization taking control of the currency and lockdown so that individual countries don't have to then vote. We can just supersede all of that, right? It's all part of the documents. It's all part of the plan.
Yes. So thank you to our New Zealand viewers who sent us a lot of that information and continue to do so. We are watching this story, and those are just, those are international policies that I do not agree with, and I find just as troubling, and we will continue to watch.